Hey guys, welcome to KXC Online Midweek Edition.
Hey, great to have you with us. I'm Jen.
And I'm Dan.
And this is Ruben, who we're hoping is going to be professional throughout.
This is presenting debut. So, the heart behind this... The heart behind this is to have a chance to pause, to reflect, and just to recenter ourselves around Jesus as a community in the middle of the week.
Yeah, Pete caught up with some good friends of KXC earlier this week, Julian and Katia Adams, so we're really looking forward to hearing from them. And then after that, Rebecca Hamilton's going to bring us a devotional thought.
But to kick us off, here's another Hamilton, Colin, who's going to lead us in some worship.
How great the chasm that lay between us, how high the mountain I could not climb. In desperation, I turned to heaven, spoke your name into the night. Then through the darkness, your loving kindness tore through the shadow of my soul. Your work is finished, the end is written. Jesus Christ, my living so great a mercy. What heart could fathom such boundless grace? The God of ages stepped down from glory to wear my sin and bear my shame. The cross has spoken, I am forgiven. The King of Kings calls me his own. Beautiful Savior, I'm yours forever. Jesus Christ, my living hope. Hallelujah, praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah. Death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name. Jesus Christ, my living hope. Then came the morning that sealed the promise. Your buried body began to breathe. Out of the silence, the roaring lion declared the grave has no claim on me. Then came the morning that sealed the promise. Your buried body, it began to breathe. Out of the silence, the roaring lion, he declared the grave has no claim on me. With Jesus, yours is the victory. Set me free, hallelujah. lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living hope. Hallelujah, praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah, death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living hope. Jesus Christ, my living hope. God, you are my living hope.
Well, it's an absolute gift to have Julian and Katia with us. They're currently in Redding, California, but within the next few weeks they're moving to Boston as they get ready to plant their church, Table Boston. So incredibly exciting. I've also just received this in the post. This is Julian's new book, Terra Nova, that's coming out, a phenomenal read. So the point of this interview, we're asking some friends, prophetic figures, people that we've tracked with as a church family at KXC, the same two questions. The first question, which is really ripped out of Matthew 16, where Jesus says to the Pharisees, you can look at the sky and you can forecast the weather. Why can't you read the signs of the times? And we think it's part of our task as the followers of Jesus to discern what's the Spirit doing right now in this crazy season. How can we jump on board what the Spirit's doing? And the second question is just a bit more personal. What are you learning yourselves about life, about God, about the kingdom in this season? So we'll start with question number one. As you look at the culture, as you look at what God's doing globally, but then locally, what do you read the Spirit's doing in this moment?
You know, I brought some prophetic words in November in England that there will be significant awakening that is going to begin to happen. And I'm thinking, I see retrospectively what God said, and this means I now get to lean into the moment with a hopeful expectation that what he said is still true, that he hasn't changed his mind. And so I think for me, that's been the internal process as someone who prophesies regularly, is actually connecting the dots again, saying, God's been speaking. Personally, God spoke to us about a season of delay before we step into moving into the Table Boston. And we had our delay wonderfully planned. But God has extended that delay. And in that, we've seen God add to us. We've seen God grow our team. Things that we could never do through the arm of our own strength, God has done through his working things out, even in the midst of a global pandemic. So I think for me, it is the expectation that the best is happening. It's not still to be, it's not still to come. God is using the shake-up, as he always does. He uses the worst moments that we think nothing good can come out of it. And he goes, I can make something happen here. And so I feel like we are on the edge. We are we're ankle deep in the rising tide of a spiritual awakening.
Yes.
That is going to hit the world. And so it's really exciting time to be alive.
And I was at one of those gatherings, where you shared some of that stuff, about the gospel's going to ring out. And again, even some of the research that's coming out of the UK right now, a piece of research commissioned by Tear Fund, that almost 25% of the population have tuned into online church services. In the demographic of 18 to 30, it's 34%. So there's a generation where this spiritual hunger's alive and they're beginning to tune in. It's incredible. Katia, same question to you, because I know both of you spend a lot of time traveling the world, speaking into the church. So you have a really unique perspective, not just in terms of California, but through all of your traveling. What do you see the Spirit doing right now?
Sure. I think there are seasons where God uses the moment to put a spotlight on the totally different narrative of the kingdom in comparison to the narrative of the world. And there are some times where life is going perfectly, and even as Christians, we can make those narratives collide. We almost forget that there are two different stories at work. But there are moments like this where one narrative goes so negative that it allows the kingdom narrative to completely cut across. I believe that's God's intention, to allow that narrative to completely cut across. And if we as Christians have the wisdom and have the ears to hear what the Spirit is saying, then we then have the opportunity to jump in on a kingdom narrative that is completely different to the narrative and to the voice that the world is using in that season. You know, in the world, there's this shutdown of, okay, this is my moment to safeguard. How do I lock everything in? How do I ensure that I have enough money for tomorrow? The world is looking in, and that's understandable. Where else does the world look in a moment like this? And yet the kingdom narrative hasn't changed from what we find in the Bible, hasn't changed from the declaration that we see Jesus making, hasn't changed from the invitation to live lives that are so outrageously generous because we know an outrageously generous Father. And so I feel like even in small details like that, although they're small when you say them, they're not small when you look at your bank balance, right? But even in details like that, I believe God is putting a spotlight on what the kingdom sounds like in such an alien way to what the world sounds like, and is inviting Christians to step up and inviting Christians to we can make a sound. We can agree with a sound in this season. We can agree with the sound of disappointment, of this is over, of, hell has come on earth, all of that. Or we can agree with the sound that, no, the kingdom is coming, and this is a moment where generosity shines, where compassion is shining, where reaching out to people in whatever way that might be, that can shine. And so I really feel like this is one of those groundbreaking seasons where it's not just about the negative that's happening, but God is saying, okay, it's time for the positive voice of the kingdom to get ever louder, and for that contrast to be what puts the kingdom in spotlight.
One of the questions I want to ask you both is, this is a time to live by faith. You know, we can't live by sight because none of us know what's round the corner. I feel like we're walking through a dark valley like Psalm 23, and we need to hear the voice of our shepherd. He's the only one that can lead us to green pastures and still waters. So I guess there's two questions in this. One, any thoughts about how we tune in, to the voice of the Father? Like, how do we grow our prophetic gift right now? Because we need to hear the voice of God. And then also, how do we be bold and live by faith? Like, you guys are about to plant a church. This must be one of the craziest moments to plant a church in a city like Boston. You can only do that if you live by faith. I guess any strategy that you had, you're having to sort of rewrite it on the back of a napkin or whatever. So two questions. How do we grow in the prophetic? How do we be bold and live by faith? Because I think both are critical to this time.
One of the things I'm most convinced of is that the best prophet in the Bible is Jesus. And when we see him as the full revelation of God, we get the opinion of what God thinks about any given situation.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking about how Jesus deals with natural disasters. He speaks peace into that context. There's a storm in a boat. His natural response to that, and the Jewish worldview in that season would being that natural disasters are a demonic onslaught. There's something that's negative. And Jesus doesn't address whether it's demonic or not. He simply speaks peace into the situation. There is something powerful about learning to speak like Jesus. And you don't have to go on a prophetic course to do that. You don't have to work out a particular skill set. You just need to see Jesus as he is portrayed in the Gospels. There's something beautiful about the way that he deals with life. And if we can join and echo how he deals with life, it will silence most things around you, because that is the clarity of how God speaks and through whom God speaks.
Yeah.
In Hebrews, it tells us in chapter 1 that God spoke to us through prophets in many different ways. In fact, one translation talks about it like little puzzle pieces. But now he speaks to us through Jesus, his son. And he is the full revelation of what he's thinking about everything. And I love that, the emphasis there is that the language of God is sonship. And so for me, where I'm no longer traveling, I'm no longer able to, in an expressive way, operate in my prophetic gift in ways that I'm used to. I'm having to lean right back into sonship with Jesus again and understand what it means for me to be a son, understand what it means to hear the still small voice of heaven, and being convinced again that God is incredibly good, and not just good, he's incredibly kind with his goodness, and allowing that to form the narrative, allowing that to form what I speak. You will always reflect the reality you're most aware of.
Yeah.
And so as I've come into a greater understanding, for me, after being in ministry for nearly 24 years now, of sonship again come to the place of I need a rest that actually God's a good father, and that the voice that needs to drown out every other voice has to be around his goodness, has to be around his kindness, has to be around my settledness that he's good and that he will not prove himself wrong to me. And so for me, I think I'm learning to speak from that place. How does peace govern my heart?
In the seasons when the pressure is on, we've got to be more aware of the diet that we're feeding ourselves. And I don't mean just natural food, although corona weight gain is a real thing. But
no guilt.
But in these seasons where we're thinking, how do I keep walking in faith? How do I step out in boldness? How do I hear the word of God? Well, the question before that is, what am I feeding myself? What am I allowing my attention to be turned to? And a few weeks ago, I really felt God speaking to me about this personally in terms of, I was reading in Mark and Jesus is speaking to his disciples. He's talking about the end times and uses this parable of a master leaving his servants in charge of everything. And really, they need to stay alert for the master's return. And Jesus right at the end just says, what I say to you, I say to all, stay awake. And I felt God really speak to me about that for this season, that if we're not careful, we can enter into lots of modes of escapism in this season because we're bored and because we don't know what to do and we're a bit scared and we're uncertain of the future. And Christians are just as much of danger as this as anybody else in terms of, I'm just going to sit and binge watch Netflix all day, which isn't necessarily bad. But if there's a sense of, I just want to mute everything, and so I'm just going to feed on anything that will let me escape this, I felt Jesus speaking to me and saying, don't do that. Stay awake. This is a season to stay awake. This isn't a season to kind of sleep your way through and hope that it ends soon. This is a season where Christians actually, we need to open our eyes and we need to make our ears even more sensitive, because the enemy will just constantly say to us, just bide your time, like just build a safe cave and hide in it. And God's like, no, the kingdom isn't hiding in this season. This is a season for Christians actually to be more alert than ever. But to do that, we've got to be aware of the diet we're feeding ourselves. If we're feasting on news cycles 24/7, and if we're feasting on conspiracy theories, dare I say it, 24/7, and if we're feasting on hearsay from different people, whatever it may be, then the diet that we're giving ourselves is completely contrary to the voice of God in the season. And so this moment, more than any other maybe, is really encouraging us to read, to pray, to keep listening to faith stories, keep listening to impossible stories. Maybe rather than watching your 10th episode of whatever series, maybe let's go onto YouTube and watch some crazy revival stories and watch clips of Catherine Kuhlman and just radical, crazy revivalists who maybe we don't agree with everything they did, but they carry a sense of impossibility. I think of our hearts generally like tubes, like the London Underground. And basically our hearts have a finite amount of space in them. And you can pack, I'm sure Londoners have been, I used to live in London, I love the underground. And rush hour in the underground is quite a special thing, but you can pack as many people in as physically possible. But then there comes this moment where one person, risk taker, right at the end is like, I'm going to get myself in there. And they just can't. They're like rebounding off the mass of people that are already in there. And that's what we need to do with truth in our hearts. We need to so pack our hearts so full with truth that it's like that last person underground moment where the enemy tries to bring in a lie. It's like there actually isn't any more room on this train. There is no physical space on this train for negativity or for discouragement or for doubt, because we're so using this season to invest, to pack full our hearts with truth, with scripture, with testimony, with worship, whatever that may be. And so I think that's the route to staying bold, to staying faith-filled in this season, is intentionally feasting so much that our hearts are packed full and there's no room for anything else.
Yeah, I love that. That's incredible. Final question then, just personally, what are you guys learning? How are you staying sane? Yeah, how are you growing in this season?
Great question, Pete. How are we staying sane?
Red wine and jazz really does help.
Yes, let's keep it real. We've got 2 toddlers in the mix. There are days where it feels like everything is insane. I think we're having grace for each other and learning much more about how to carry each other and how to navigate the atmosphere and culture of our home whilst being sensitive to allowing each other to have a down day. But I think it's been a great thing of learning how to speak hope and peace whilst allowing someone to process disappointment. And I think we're definitely growing in that with each other. When one of us is feeling disappointment, not squashing that and saying, no, there's no room for you to experience anything other than whatever this bliss in this home, but rather allowing the processing of disappointment, which I think is so important. We have to process pain to get to the other side, but still encouraging a culture of peace in that processing, I think.
Yeah, I think for me, 2 things. I think my poor family's been subjected to me singing worship songs randomly. And God bless them, but it works for me.
I have a lovely voice, darling. Lovely.
I think, seriously though, I think finding moments in the crazy just to belt out a song of love and adoration, shift something in your own internal atmosphere. I think finding moments to pray in the Spirit. The Bible tells us that when we do that, we build up our faith. And I think it is one of the most underrated moments. And sometimes we think that praying in the Spirit is just about speaking in tongues. But actually in Romans, it talks about sighs that we cannot express. I think sometimes God just loves a sigh. He just loves the kind of, oh, God help me. Those moments. And God's in those moments. He fortifies us in those moments, even when we don't have enough words to communicate that to Him. And so I think feeling the nearness of His presence because of being postured in worship. Even in the midst of crazy, even in the midst of me cooking a meal and kids are going crazy, just being able to say, Jesus, I love you under my breath, or just being able to sing a song that drugs out every other noise. But seriously, I think that's really key for us.
And just on a really practical level, I was noticing that because we're spending so much more time at home, obviously, that our time on social media, for me, was going up exponentially because my time wasn't filled with all the running about and the meetings that I normally have. And so it was a few minutes here and a few minutes there. And by the end of the day, I'm like, I've read a lot of junk today. There's just, you're just not even aware of it because it's a couple of minutes while the kids are screaming around me. And so really practically, I've been trying to just put books around the place, books that are good and that I can just pick up. And rather than have 2 minutes on the latest Instagram post, I can spend the 2 minutes and read one page of a book that actually, whether it's a novel, whether it's fiction, whether it's a Christian book, it's just trying to change the coping mechanisms that aren't doing me good and putting in place things that will actually let me flourish instead.
There's a great book called All Things New.
Has Julie been putting these all around the house? There's one in the toilet, one in the kitchen.
It's all around the house. That was about to say.
Thank you so much, guys, for your time. That was an absolute gift learning from you both. We love you both so much, and we're praying for the church you're about to plant in Boston. So huge
Thank
love
you
and
so
God bless.
much. We love you guys.
Too. Lots of love.
Psalm 61, the Message, a David psalm. God, listen to me shout, bend an ear to my prayer. When I'm far from anywhere, down to my last gasp, I call out, guide me up High Rock Mountain. You've always given me breathing room, a place to get away from it all, a lifetime pass to your safe house, an open invitation as your guest. You've always taken me seriously, God, made me welcome among those who know and love you. Let the days of the King add up to years and years of good rule. Set his throne in the full light of God. Post steady love and good faith as lookouts, and I'll be the poet who sings your glory and live what I sing every day.
Researchers at UCL here in London have been conducting a study throughout lockdown, throughout this pandemic, called the COVID-19 Study. And basically they're looking at the impact of the virus, but specifically the impact of social distancing measures on individuals. And there are loads of interesting stats that have come out of that. But in particular, I was drawn to the one on loneliness. Young people, so people in the category 18 to 29-year-olds, have reported significantly higher levels of loneliness. People living on their own, significantly higher levels of loneliness. And also people in urban, so city context, over rural context, significantly higher levels of loneliness. And that's not even talking about mental health. It's widely reported that anxiety and depression are on the rise, that have risen in lockdown, again, specifically in the younger category, 18 to 29-year-olds. And when that category was asked if they had engaged with any sort of thoughts of self-harm or even death, up to 30% at different points during lockdown reported having had such thoughts. Now, in a church like ours, we are in an urban centre, we're in London, in a city, and our congregation is majority kind of in that younger category. There's a good chance that some of us, if not a lot of us, have had challenges in our mental health and in loneliness throughout this pandemic. I know I have. You know, I've had my moments of, what have I done? I've run my 5Ks, I've planted my herbs, which are growing very well, thank you, and also my window boxes. My flowers are about to come into bloom. I've even picked up my old flute, which honestly I probably haven't touched in about 15 years. Colin's making sourdough. But if I'm honest, those moments are probably getting further and farther between. And moments of low energy and of struggling for motivation and of hopelessness and of frustration are definitely setting in. And speaking to others, I know that that seems to be the case for so many other people as well. But above all, I miss people. I miss my family. I miss my friends. I feel it like deep inside, like a physical feeling of missing my family. I'm lonely without the people that I usually see every day that bring joy to me every day. Of course, Zoom and FaceTime are incredibly helpful, and I would not have made it through this without technology. I'm so grateful for it. But it's not the same. It's great being able to see people every day and chat to them on FaceTime, but it's not the same. It's not enough. We know that from our own personal experiences. The stats are telling us, the media is telling us. We're lonely and we're desperate for connection, physical connection, real connection. A hug, a long chat over a coffee in a local coffee shop, a birthday party where we can actually eat and dance in the same room, not over Zoom. Fill in the blank, whatever it is for you. And I find it fascinating, another piece in that UCL research, they asked what activities people have been missing during lockdown. And the top 2 reported activities are missing meeting with friends and missing meeting with family. Going to the gym, going to work, all of that stuff is way down the bottom. The things that people are missing people. You're not alone. If you've struggled with any of those things that I've just mentioned, or if you've just struggled in any way during this lockdown, during this pandemic, you're not alone. We're all on this journey. Yes, we've got different triggers and experiences that we're going through, but we are all on the journey together. I promise you, you are not alone. And maybe that's all you even need to hear today, that what you're going through is not your own unique experience. We're all sharing in this experience. Because I hate to disappoint you, but you probably have guessed I do not have the answers. I haven't worked out what it looks like to truly thrive in lockdown, to truly thrive in this season. All I can offer are a couple of reflections as I've walked through this. So firstly, we were created for connection. You know, right back in the garden, right back in Genesis, when God creates Adam, he gifts Adam Eve. And what does he say? He says it's not good for man to be alone. The first human, it's not good for them to be alone. They need relationship. He wasn't going to flourish. And why? Because we are made and created in the image of God. So if we want to know something about what it means to be human, how to flourish as humans, we have to look at the Creator. God himself, Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, in relationship, and his very being, relationship. He is relationship. And so why would we as humans ever conceive of ourselves like independent islands? If God himself is in his being relationship, then we are defined by relationship. Martin Luther talks about sin as being a life or a heart turned in on itself. So in other words, not how we were created to be. We were created to look outwards. We were created to turn outwards in relationship to God, to each other, and to the world. And we crave connection and we crave relationship and we thrive in relationship because that's how we were created to be. And I find that incredibly releasing and incredibly reassuring. It's no wonder we're struggling in this season. We're not weak or failing in some way for not being able to survive without real connection. We're yearning for that physical connection. It's because we were created that way. And yet here we find ourselves. We find ourselves disconnected physically from so many of the people we love. We find ourselves at times lonely and feeling completely isolated. So how do we hold these two things in tension, knowing what we were created for, relationship, but living through a time when we're physically disconnected from each other? Well, this is where my answers really do run out. There's no fix to this. There's no fix all to this situation. But I wonder if the Spirit is stirring two things. This is what I sense anyway. Firstly, I feel like he's saying, it's okay. It's okay to feel like this. Let me minister to you. Bring it to me. Let me heal your heart. Let me soothe your soul. Come and rest in me. Come and be in my presence. Bring it all to me. First and foremost, the relationship that we were created for is with our Father, is with God. And so that relationship that doesn't depend on Corona, thankfully, that doesn't depend on FaceTime or proximity or physical nearness, is there through the power of his Spirit, is near, it fills us through the power of his Spirit. Let's rest in that relationship. And secondly, the other thing I feel like he's stirring is that he's saying, don't give up. If we were created to thrive in relationship, then that's true in this season. It's true in every season. It's what it means to be human. And we can flourish in this season. And we will all walk our own journeys to work out what that looks like. I don't know what that will be for you. You will walk your own journey. I'll walk my own journey. But the Spirit whose very purpose is to bring life and flourishing to all of creation, including us as humans, is the Spirit that fills us. It's the Spirit that energizes us. It's the Spirit that gives us hope and life. Let's push into relationship, yes, with God, but also with each other. It can be so easy to retreat, to turn off, but instead let's stay connected to our friends, stay connected to our families, stay connected to our hubs and to church. Don't give up. Because the Spirit of the living God is within you, bringing you life. And I guess finally, let's talk, let's be open about this stuff. Yes, let's talk to God, we bring it before God, but we also need each other. That's the whole point. If you need someone to talk to, find a friend, talk to your mum, talk to your hub leader, whoever that person is. But let's stay connected. Let's not give up. It's not how it's meant to be. We were made for a relationship with God and with each other in every single season.
I will lean not on my understanding, for your ways are higher than the stars. When I thought I'd figured out your wisdom, you revealed I'm only at the start. Lord, I know I'm only at the start. With heart and soul, I will trust in you, not everything I know. With heart and soul, letting go, I will trust you in the highs and in the lows. 'Cause you're the God who made this heart and soul. When I'm standing in a sea of chaos, you say cast your net the other side. Trust my heart and trust in my provision. All you give, I'll always multiply. With heart and soul, I will trust in you, not everything I know. Heart and soul, letting go, I will trust you in the highs and in the lows. 'Cause you're the God who made this heart and soul. Oh, 'cause you're the only one I've ever needed. 'Cause you're the only one I'll ever need. Lord, I come alive in worship. 'Cause you're the God who made this heart and soul. With heart and soul, I will trust in you, not everything I know. With heart and soul, letting go, and I will trust you in the highs and in the lows. 'Cause you're the God who made this heart and soul.
Hey guys, that's all for today unfortunately. We hope you've enjoyed it and you feel really uplifted.
Yeah, thanks to everyone who contributed to today's midweek edition. We'll be back at the same time next week.
So please do join us for our Sunday service, 10 o'clock for kids and family, 11 o'clock and 4:30 for everybody else.
See you later.
Bye guys!